Hey guys, before the video gets underway, I'm really trying to hit 1,000 subs here on YouTube, so if you could drop me a sub and a like on this video, it would be greatly appreciated. Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, this is going to be the first ever episode of Jersey Time. The series where I tell the story behind the hockey jersey. Contracts to trade trees to legal disputes to on ice big time goals, playoff moments, and everything in between. The first episode of Jersey Time or Story Time, whatever you want to call it, is this retro 1967 to 1970 jersey that the Leafs wore the last time they won the Stanley Cup. But this is not going to be a video of a Leaf fan reliving the last time his team won a Stanley Cup, because this is a video about the player on the back of the jersey. This is how David Clarkson and his contract changed the NHL forever. And to tell that story, we need to go back before the actual signing itself, because we need to remember the reason why the Maple Leafs needed David Clarkson. The scene is Boston, 2013. The Leafs lose Game 7 to the Bruins in heartbreaking fashion. We all know the story, but the prevailing thought after this series was that the Leafs simply weren't tough enough to beat the Bruins. They needed to be ferocious. They needed to be tenacious. They needed something that they were missing. And to the Maple Leafs, they thought that that was David Clarkson. 29-year-old at the time from Mimico, Ontario, the birthplace of players like Dave Bolland and Brendan Shanahan, was coming off of a season the previous year to him being a free agent where he scored 30 goals as a New Jersey Devil. And in the lockout-shortened year, he had 15 goals and 24 points in 48 games. Maple Leafs signed David Clarkson to a $36.75 million contract for 7 seasons. And the quote from general manager Dave Nonis at the time was that the Maple Leafs were not going to have to worry about the last year of that contract. He meant himself personally, because I think he expected to be fired by then. And the Edmonton Oilers had offered him even more money, but the lifelong Toronto Maple Leaf fan took less to come home. And David Clarkson, like a lot of Leaf fans his age, grew up watching the team and idolizing guys like Doug Gilmour and Wendell Clark. David Clarkson being the type of player that he was, the type of player that would drop the gloves, get nitty and gritty down along the boards, score some goals, having come off of a 30-goal season just a year or two before that, there were some comparisons made. This was a Toronto Sun front cover the day that David Clarkson signed. He fights, he scores, he's from Toronto, guess who his idol was? Here's a hint, we put the famous mullet and stash on him. The hometown boy was instantly branded as the savior, the guy that was going to restore old-time hockey and order in Toronto. But that's about as glorious as the story gets, because as we know, it goes downhill from here. The scene is September 22nd, 2013, Air Canada Centre. The Toronto Maple Leafs are taking on the Buffalo Sabres in what would be one of the last preseason games of the year before the NHL season got underway. It's a rather pedestrian preseason game. I mean, whatever. From what I can conduct from the box score, the Maple Leafs were either beating the Buffalo Sabres 3-1 or 4-1 in the second or third period. Buffalo Sabres giant and noted goon and also kind of softy John Scott's thrown over the boards to do his thing as an enforcer. He skates by the Toronto bench and looks over at head coach Randy Carlyle and says, "Randy, I'm jumping whoever you throw over the boards." Randy Carlyle, of course, obliged and threw over superstar and Toronto Maple Leafs best player at the time, Phil Kessel, to line up with John Scott. This is where the moment kind of unfolds, right? Scott walks over to Kessel and says, "Hey, Phil, I gotta jump ya." And Phil's like, what? And then the line brawl ensues. Kessel starts hacking away at John Scott like he's trying to chop down a tree. There's line brawls going on all over the place. The goalies meet at center ice, and that leads to this picture of Jonathan Bernier absolutely feeding Ryan Miller. All the while, 13-year-old me is sitting in the lower bowl watching this, recording everything on my iPod Touch. Lost in all the craziness and the hundreds of penalty minutes that were assessed was that David Clarkson had jumped over the boards to join the fight. And in the NHL, when you do such a thing, it's an automatic 10-game suspension. And that would really set the tone for David Clarkson's career as a Toronto Maple Leaf. Not really being there all too much. HBO did that whole 24/7 special thing where they followed around the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings on the road to the Winter Classic that year. And there was that whole water bottle police thing with David Clarkson. And looking back on it, the Toronto Maple Leafs can kind of use a player like that. Just someone to just be friggin' annoying. Just someone to just go in there and say, yeah, that's our water bottle, don't touch it. Clarkson would go on to score 5 goals and 11 points in 60 games that season. Definitely not worth the 5.2 whatever million dollars they were paying him that year. But the real story is that the Maple Leafs lost 12 of their last 14 games to end the season and missed the playoffs. Pretty handedly too, might I add, but it's okay because this led to them drafting William Nylander, and those are happy memories. David Clarkson would battle some shoulder and some elbow injuries while he was with the Leafs, and it really limited the number of games that he got into in the 14-15 season. And the Maple Leafs ended up pulling off one of the most confusing trades almost ever. Trading David Clarkson to the Columbus Blue Jackets for Nathan Horton. Which is really where this story starts to get even crazier, if that's even possible. Because the logistics behind that trade would change the NHL forever, almost, and it would introduce us to long-term injury reserve. So the official definition of long-term injury reserve is when a player has an injury of which they are expected to miss a minimum of 10 NHL games and 24 days in an NHL season. The team can place them on LTIR, and LTIR can be used to exceed the salary cap. The trade kind of revolves around Nathan Horton having a really bad back. Going back to the 2011 Stanley Cup Finals, Aaron Rome really did a number on him with a really predatorial, really dangerous hit. The back became a struggle for Nathan Horton to the point where he could barely even walk, let alone play hockey. And the Columbus Blue Jackets, being the smaller market team that they are, could not afford to insure the massive contract that they handed out to Nathan Horton the exact same day, funny enough, that the Maple Leafs signed David Clarkson in 2013. And I guess the thinking for the Columbus Blue Jackets was that we can't afford to pay a player over $5 million to not play for us. So at least David Clarkson, his contract's equally as bad, but at least we'll get some value for it. At least we'll get a guy on the ice. The Maple Leafs, finally using the financial might that would label them as the evil empire for years to come, paid Nathan Horton's salary for him to basically just sit at home and recover for his back injury while David Clarkson went on to play for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, mind you, it was only 26 games and he only put up 4 points in those games, so, not really the greatest value. Like I said, David Clarkson was battling injuries of his own and he ended up finding himself in the same situation as Nathan Horton, not able to play hockey anymore. He failed his physical, but the difference being is that David Clarkson's contract was insured and Nathan Horton's was not. So while David Clarkson would sit on LTIR for the Blue Jackets, it wasn't the Blue Jackets that were shilling out the money. But having players on long-term injury reserves presents complications for your team, especially if you're a smaller market team like the Columbus Blue Jackets, and at the time the Blue Jackets did not want to spend to the cap ceiling, and that would really pose a problem for them because David Clarkson was taking up room on their salary cap because they couldn't place him on LTIR without being at or above that ceiling. Enter the Vegas Golden Knights, and direct your attention down to the 2 bottom trades on the screen because this is where things start to really map out. The Columbus Blue Jackets trade David Clarkson, a first-round pick in the 2017 draft and a second-round pick in the 2019 draft, to the Vegas Golden Knights for expansion draft considerations. And if you remember the format from that Vegas Golden expansion, it was either 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, 1 goalie, or 8 players in total, and the Columbus Blue Jackets had a lot of no-movement clauses that they automatically had to protect, so there weren't a lot of options for them, and they ended up giving the Las Vegas Golden Knights a first, a second, and David Clarkson in order to select William Karlsson and not Jonas Korpisalo, I believe. Which, Jonas Korpisalo, Elvis Merzlikins, yeah, pretty great goalie tandem, but holy crap, William Karlsson scored 40 goals for the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And that's not the end of it. The Vegas Golden Knights took that first round pick and flipped it to the Winnipeg Jets in exchange for a better first round pick and expansion draft considerations, and that was to select Chris Thorburn in the expansion draft. And that better first-round pick turned out to be Nick Suzuki, who was one of the main pieces that was included in the Max Pacioretty trade. July 23rd, 2019, I am getting ready to go to one of my slow pitch games, and the Toronto Maple Leafs reacquire David Clarkson from the Las Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for Garrett Sparks. They also get a 4th-round pick in that deal. And everyone was instantly freaking out. Oh my god, why would the Toronto Maple Leafs reacquire a player making $5.25 million in the middle of when they're trying to sign Mitch Marner, who wants $14 million? Well, the trade is kind of stupid and silly, and the NHL should really kind of abolish like little nitsy stupid stuff like that. For those of you that want the TLDR, here it is. At the time of the trade, the Maple Leafs were not operating at the salary cap ceiling. And that's important because you need to be operating at or above the salary cap in order to place a player on LTIR. So that means with Mitch Marner unsigned, the Maple Leafs would not be able to place Nathan Horton on LTIR right at the beginning of the season, and that poses a difficulty because then you don't receive the maximum amount of relief. So in trading for David Clarkson's phantom cap hit, it would then put the Maple Leafs at or above the salary cap and in a position where they could place one or both of them on LTIR once the season begins, and then when they did eventually work out a contract for Mitch Marner, it would allow them to take that phantom money that they have over here and give it to Mitch Marner and not have to make any trades or worry about not having enough money. So it was a tactic that safeguarded the Toronto Maple Leafs from getting screwed by Mitch Marner's camp not signing before the season started. This guy right here is the reason why David Clarkson is a Maple Leaf again and currently on their books. He's the reason why the Maple Leafs did eventually have to worry about the 7th year of that contract, because right now we're currently in it. The Nathan Horton for David Clarkson trade changed the way the NHL would operate for the next 5 years and for the foreseeable future until they work out a way to stop teams from abusing LTIR. I explained it in a previous video, but the Chicago Blackhawks used it to their advantage in 2015 when Patrick Kane broke his collarbone. They were able to add $6 million more to their salary cap than what they should have been able to because Patrick Kane sat out for the rest of the season and returned in the playoffs when the salary cap doesn't count anymore. That Nathan Horton for David Clarkson swap is the reason why the Arizona Coyotes have been used as basically a dumping site for the last 4 or 5 seasons. Marian Hossa's contract, Chris Pronger, Dave Bolin, Stefan Robida, Joffrey Lupul, there's been a lot of these cases. And I'm sure there were examples of LTIR being abused before the Nathan Horton and David Clarkson trade happened, but this was really the first one where a lot of people started to take notice, and it's all thanks to Brandon Pridham, the Maple Leafs capologist who basically wrote the book on all this stuff. So from the Leafs losing to Boston in Game 7 in 2013, to William Nylander, to Mitch Marner, to the Arizona Coyotes being used as a deserted graveyard, David Clarkson changed the NHL the way that we know it now and for the foreseeable future. I mean, who knew all that trouble could come from just the jersey? So guys, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more because more is always on the way. But guys, seriously, hit the like button on this video. It took me a ton of time to research and film. And let me know if you liked Jersey Time and you want to see more episodes like this. Still trying to figure out a way how to end these videos now that there's no hockey right now, or probably for the foreseeable future. But just to put you all at ease, don't worry, I only paid $30 for the jersey.